Hello, everybody. Welcome to State of the Culture, a podcast by Urban Conscious. You're tuned in with your hosts, Sean Carter and Devon, and we want to give a special shout out to a couple of our sponsors before we get started. I want to thank Nero Entertainment and Junction Complex for helping us get started with this podcast series and for giving us the space to create and have these conversations. So, thank you guys. So before we get started, I want to give a quick introduction of what exactly this podcast series is. So, what is State of the Culture? This is a podcast, social commentary series that's meant to bring light to the social experiences that we have as young people living this urban experience. And really, we want to have very organic and authentic conversations that allow us to have these breakthroughs and discuss the influences, the digital spaces that we live through, and these various social crises that we're living through in this modern age. So yeah, we really hope that we can bring some value to you guys through this conversation. And again, before we get started, I want to give a couple quick introductions. So, uh, I'm Sean Carter, one of your hosts, born and raised here in Las Vegas, Nevada, currently working in the fashion industry. An all around creative. I started Urban Conscious back in 2017 as a creative collective, really just to bring different artists from different genres and different backgrounds together so that we can create and bring original ideas to life. And this is part of that process, really just creating more spaces where we can have these very intimate and real conversations and just contribute to this social experience. Pass over to Devon.
Peace, peace. It's Devon. Born and raised in Pittsburgh. Recent transplant. It's been about a year. Um, Work as well as in the fashion industry as well. Um, Originally, my background is in education, is in political science. But I also have a very, very deep connection to the creative communities that I'm from. I grew up as an actor and as a writer in theater. Really have had a merry background. Currently operating my own theater company called Dream Theater, which is a Dream Theater basically is a company devoted to creating theatrical innovative experiences for the modern theatrical goer. While using things from pop culture to help tell those stories for the modern audience. So, we have a lot of great perspectives here between Sean and I. So hopefully we'll be able to, as he said, bring some light uh, to you guys listening.
Yes, sir. So, the topic for this first conversation is managing the moment. So, we're living through a crazy moment, to say the least. We've got the COVID pandemic happening globally, we've got the Black Lives Matter movement going on, and not to mention just the mental health crisis and many other things that are being exposed in this moment. So, really, I mean, we're living in this time of hyper awareness. We've got social media, we've got um, a plethora of news sources.
Right.
So what really is the impact of this? How is this technology affecting us? Is it helping us? Is it hurting us? What's your take on this, Devon?
Right. I mean, we've, definitely, I think, exposed the pitfalls I think that social media can get into. And, last episode we talked about, the contract that you sign with social media. But I think, the real impact I think is, for me, I think it just doesn't allow us to, you know, always be able to have a great sense of what's going on. When you feel like, it's like the thing, we can't really see what we don't really know what the Milky Way galaxy looks like because we're in the fucking middle of it.
Right.
So it's the same, it's the same kind of thing. I think with social media, it's always based from your perspective. You're the center of it.
Yeah, you're kind of insulated in a bubble almost.
Right. You're insulated in a bubble, but you're also given the platform to only exercise your opinion
Yeah.
without restraint or without really any effective way of a dialogue. Because I was just saying,
Yeah.
I tweeted a couple of days ago that texting is not real communication.
Yeah.
Like it's just not. You know what
Yeah.
I'm saying? Like when we talked last conversation about things that we consider now is insane, and I think that's one of the things that's is insane is that we really you know because even in other spaces how this has affected personal relationship, how social media, I think that's a topic we really don't discuss. But I think that's it's really insane how we put these basically these digital tools as our only mechanisms to create the things that define our lives, which are our relationships, which is our what we do,
Yeah.
what we say, how our reputation, all of that is, all those were once things that culminated in different areas, not outside of a centralized vacuum as social
Right.
media, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, and I think that that's definitely one of the most like mentally confusing aspects of digital or of navigating the digital realm. Like the framing, the narrative kind of thing. You really don't have to entertain or interact with somebody whose perspective is not in line with your own. And like you said, there's no way of really like facilitating a dialogue that is deeper than just those very surface level. Oh, this is my opinion. I believe this, and you're not going to change my way of thinking. In the past, like everything was much more communal. I'm 24. Like I've grown up in this age where it's like, I had to go outside to play, and that's how I made friends.
Right.
Um, there's kids growing up now that their friends are all made through
That's
like
not a
Roblox.
concept. It's not a concept, and it's not a
Yeah,
valuable one anymore because, like we were saying before, it's like that's not where the energy is. Like, you know what I'm
right.
saying? Like the energy, I even look at this from, and it's just where we're at. Like I think a lot of education is gonna, this is just me speaking into the future, but on top of what we're saying, like, that's where we're at. That's our community.
Yeah,
And especially if you're from a young generation, you don't have any other concept, like I said, valuable to you outside of this digital community. So
yeah,
eventually, like I said, using education as an example with young people, um, eventually education is going to have to be set up, maybe like TikTok.
right.
Like we don't.
It's got to be a means of grabbing the attention of this younger generation
Right.
whose attention span has been shrunk down to less than
But
5 minutes for most things.
it's not even really about the. I think the attention span. I think there's something to that too. But I think there's also attention span is a lot of conditioning.
Yeah,
And I think we're
yeah,
just in a place of conditioning where getting information the fastest and being able to share it the fastest is priority. And I said this
mm-hmm,
last week,
mm-hmm.
like the Denzel Washington, viral video. It's like, well, you know, there's a price to too much information, and the price is it's not about truth; it's about who's first. And you know, I think that's, but it's just like, how do we? What is the criteria,
Mm.
honestly, for these digital communities, and what, and like going back to the contract, what is our real purpose on there? Like,
What's
what are
our
we really there to
intention?
get out of there, and what are we really there to give on there?
Yeah,
And I think that's really, I think that's just like a question that's it's always been important, but I think now that like we said, because of everything going on now, obviously social media and technology's role has almost become there's no escaping it now.
yeah, it's everywhere.
You
I mean,
know,
and I think it's interesting to say that because like it's not so much like I like to have like a very I try to keep a very neutral
mm-hmm.
perspective on technology because I do see it as this means of connecting us, like the global community. We did not have that prior to the advent of the internet and to these digital spaces and social media. We can witness these social movements happening on the other side of the world. I mean, the fact that you're seeing these protests in Portland where they're taking strategies that are being used by or
Right,
were being used by Hong
right,
Kong protesters. That's important, and the way that the Black Lives Matter movement has flowered out.
mm-hmm.
But at the same time, it goes back to what you said that sense of intentionality of like what are we really doing in these spaces. I think that it has become it's like a fish in water type thing, like where we don't even recognize really what we're doing in these spaces because it's become so like secondary. But we've also forgotten kind of the rules of engagement to operating in digital spaces because you have anonymity, you have
Mm.
this like buffer of like safety that nobody can physically attack
And
you,
that's the thing.
but that's also a pitfall.
Right, the digital space takes so what that's what I'm saying. Like certain things like how someone actually dresses, how someone actually treats women or talks to adults around them, or like how much money someone actually has, all that, like these were the things that defined your social standing. Now these things can be, I was
Manipulated and
distorted,
yeah, completely
essentially.
distorted. Yeah.
And that's just that's the and it's a this concept is a concept in business of distortion. um but I think because the way profiles are set up, and because the way social media and the digital space has been commodified,
Yeah, yeah.
you
Wow,
know
you kind of read my mind on that one.
we um there's this incentive to distort.
Hmm. And
And
to paint a narrative that's
it's there, you don't nothing's taken from you
right,
to
right.
distort it. If anything, you
You're
might just be
gaining.
adding,
Yeah,
to the potential, you know, fulfillment of your life. Like,
because authenticity is also a very relative thing. Like it, if you genuinely the concept of transgenderism, right? Like that's very valid. Like people are born men, they feel a woman, or born a woman, feel a man, and so they have to express a certain way in order to fully realize who they are. At the same time, like there's so many kids that want to be creatives, that want to be designers or musicians or artists in whatever sense. And so yes, that is a process. um, but I think that we've come to this place where we see everybody's process, and I think as creatives, it can be a little bit confusing to navigate that realm, because it's like, what is my offer? Am I doing this because I'm trying to be commercial, or am I doing this because I'm trying to share a perspective and contribute on a cultural level?
right. I think for me, especially, just attacking it from the creative space, and I'm going to go back to something you said before, but I think, and that's always been my thing about social media, and particularly, I think I have an interesting perspective of it, because I studied performing very closely, and I
Mm.
studied the art of acting, and there's components of acting that are essential to telling a story.
Yes, yes.
And although yes, we have access to the process, to others' processes, the again, going back to the ability that these tools
Yeah, they are
have
tools.
given us to distort it, because that's the thing. The tool doesn't distort the information.
Right.
That's what I'm saying. The code, like, we bring to it whatever we bring to it.
Yeah.
And we question, going back to the transgender, that becomes an issue, because, because I was thinking while you were talking, like, well, people have a problem with transgender people, but the real problem is, in going back to the point we're talking about, is I think people have a problem with the authenticity of themselves.
Right.
And what is that criteria anymore? And the
Right.
criteria now is so in the air.
It's very
The
broad.
criteria is, you know, and this is just my perspective, again, I say, the criteria seems to be, have your shit together, um, even though the world's burning around you. Secondly, you never go through anything. You never, your life's never really bad. Um, you never really have moments when you're not doing anything. Like,
You're
that's what
always on.
validates the fulfillment of your life. That's the criteria of authenticity. To be an authentic person living in today's society means that you do interact with these platforms on all levels.
Right.
Because it's like, from a creative perspective, the reason social media is sometimes a tenseful place for me personally, and not even personally, like, I have beefs or whatever or shit, but just in my relation to it,
Mm-hmm.
is because there's this natural conflict born inside it, where I know that it's almost
It's a
caricature
double-edged sword.
based, and it's
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
especially someone who writes scripts, it's just more scripts.
Yeah.
It's like, well, what can I say? Like, how can I say this in a way, or, you know,
I mean, these algorithms have kind of like put us in that place. Like they I mean, we've all been on Instagram prior to the advent of the algorithms that are now there, prior to Facebook acquiring Instagram, and it used to be more wholesome. Like you did have your immediate community. You did have these people. It I don't know when the explore page became a thing. I don't
That was
know.
when they bought Facebook.
Yeah, like there were these
Well, when
these
Facebook bought
yeah,
Facebook.
and just the way that the platform morphed into this commodified
And
thing
then
of
the way,
selling ad space. And not even just selling ad space, but being able to commodify how many people are liking your post, turning that into the influencer, turning that into a means of marketing, all of these things to
yeah,
where you can't be on Instagram for more than 5 minutes without being hit by at least 3, 4 ads. Like that, what is that really doing to our social experience?
well, the thing, and that's the thing, it's like, trying to mix oil and vinegar. Everyone has this, when you talk about what people want in society, you know, in the social welfare, you know, people will generally say they don't mind people doing their own thing. They want people to have their own rights, but that's not like the reality that gets embraced on a day to day
Hmm.
level. So it's just like the when you have like, and that's the thing, you brought up a great point, and I've been thinking a lot about this too. We the social media, like, and that's the thing, like, it's something that becomes tainted because even the idea, even the concept of social networking or of social media was birthed, like, what I think in the 1960s.
Yeah, yeah.
So there is this natural urge, but I think, and it's the same, and it's the same thing that the advertising industry experienced, you know, before the advent of the internet. Advertising had to become much more intentional
Right.
because its goal is to do something. Yes, it's to get someone to buy something, but it has to do it in a way that socially benefits that customer, either
Hmm.
that
Hmm.
makes them feel important or actually gives them the resource.
Status,
And that's the thing.
prestige.
And when you take that on such an individualized level with profiles, with something so insidious as mass commercialization, you're just bound. Like, we're not perfect enough to know how to navigate that or even create. And that's the thing. We're creating this as we go. We're not navigating.
Right,
It's not like we send people. It's not like we test like a city how they react to Facebook.
right. There's pockets everywhere you go, and I think that also what you just said. We're not perfect enough to utilize these spaces.
We're not.
Like there's so much potential, and it's so much good potential
Mm-hmm.
to create valuable relationships, to create valuable connections, to expose people to content and ideas that they maybe would never have had in their locale. But there's a lack of self-awareness, and I think maybe self-censorship. I don't know if that's maybe the right
Well,
word.
social media doesn't, and it's like it's like, well, what cup do you? Back to my cup example. Well, what cup do you put it in? It's like, well, social media doesn't. Yeah, we have like recommendations, but those recommendations are based off what you bring to it.
Right, exactly, exactly.
It's
It's
not like
based on
someone's
your
recommending you to be a better person.
right. It's yours
It's
actively
you're just
seeking
in your own
self-help.
circle of
Hmm.
of like of your
And
ish.
that, to be honest, like that's something like
You're just swimming in it.
I'm
Like,
yeah, I'm very big on the on mindfulness, on Buddhist philosophy, tantric philosophy,
yes.
just different aspects of the spiritual experience, and I definitely believe that like all people that you experience in your day to day life are reflections of some aspect of your consciousness. I
Mm-hmm.
really do believe that, and so like when I'm on social media and I get maybe triggered by something, I have to like ask myself like, why is that
Right.
making me feel this way? What
Right.
in myself have I ignored, or what in myself have I not honored
Mm.
to have a more like peaceable or more like I don't know, more contributive interaction with certain things, and also like I feel like for me like social media is really big in learning how to allow other people to have that experience, um, and to not be attached to it.
Right.
That's been a big
But
thing for me lately.
and the thing is, and I think I think it's great that we're talking about self, but even as you're speaking, and this is a large frame for me to put it in now that I'm thinking about it, our intention to be social at its most basic root is to get something from someone else.
It's always a transaction.
So, and that's not always physical. Like, that
Right.
could be like,
It's
I'm trying
energetic.
to get you, girl. Like, what I'm saying? It doesn't always be transactional, physical. But what I will say is when you used to have to pay a cost to get that from someone else,
Right.
i.e., going up to them, i.e., knowing someone through them, i.e., having a valuable skill to them. When you can learn about someone else's process and essentially who they are without the entrance fee,
Mm-hmm.
that's an
It's a very radical idea.
that's a different place than we've ever been in.
Yeah.
And I don't think we know that. Like, we
There
all
was-
have the for sale sign on our profiles, but there's no cost of entrance.
Right. Yeah.
And I think that's a really but that's also how we learn behavior. We learn behavior by these who we choose to go up to, who we chose to hang out in the lunchroom with,
Who we
learn
model.
those behaviors. And you talk about, like, well, how can I have a more peaceable reaction? Well, when you see these, we literally have a segment called reaction videos.
Right. That's like a crazy construct.
And kids learn how to react to certain things.
Yeah, man, that's crazy. Like watching 10-year-olds on YouTube
And that's what I'm
is
saying, you
an
really
experience.
You have to break it down to that level. Like, it's behavioral.
Yeah.
It's so intrinsic.
We don't. I think that the digital spaces, because like we say social media, and I think it's crazy. Like there's this concept of I think it's either the internet mall or the digital mall, which is basically where, like, prior to the advent of Facebook, MySpace, Reddit's, these bigger social media chat rooms, it was these. You had these pockets of the internet, and everybody kind of had their real estate, but it was more or less an open platform. Now, because of social media, it's kind of created these like silos for interaction, where now you're not going to the same hubs that you used to go in the early 2000s. You can go to Facebook and get your news, you can get your sports, you can get your entertainment, you can get reality TV, whatever it is you're searching for, you can get it in these like little pockets. And I think that in that we've kind of like you said, there used to be a social cost. There used to be a cost of some sort to having an experience, whereas now there is almost no cost, but there is a cost. The cost is your attention. The cost is your energy of whatever that means, But it is not the consequences of that cost have not they are not as immediate, and they are not as maybe not as violent. I don't know if that's maybe the right word, but we're not having the same social experience, okay, in the past, right? Like you see a girl that you're like interested in. If you didn't have the right means of approaching that woman, she was gonna shut you down. You would have to experience that rejection, but it was very physical. And now you hit somebody up in their DMs and they say something to you, it's like, oh, whatever. Like it's not. It's like a sneeze,
Or you can, and then you can end up getting shot in the foot, unfortunately.
Right. And even that situation, right? We have a woman, a powerful black woman
doesn't need anything from this man,
and yet she has been turned into a meme because she decided to hold her ground and to have some integrity and to not put
for a guy who's trying to live through memes.
Right.
She's trying to live, and that's the thing. Like that's the tension we run into. Like, some people are trying to live real life, and I'll admit that's different than social media.
Yeah.
Because what you brought up is like we have, and that's what's like this relates to a lot of business concepts, but Peter Thiel, who's I don't even want to go into that, but basically, I think social media creates a monopoly of of your social life.
Yes.
And that can be dangerous because it gives the illusion, like a monopolistic company, that you truly have ownership of it.
Yeah.
When it's you're only a small pocket of this vast market, but yet it's sold to you as if you're a part of this
This thing
large,
that's so much
vast
bigger
thing
than you.
that you can be a part of.
Yeah.
And that's the thing, like you said, like, the cost is our attention, and it's designed to be taken.
Yeah.
Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, that's the thing. Like, the last thing that we have to offer up, which is where our eyes go, essentially. Like, unless they get taken from you, and I think that's a really, I just think there's a lot of discussion, and I think just acceptance of, like, going back to what I said before, like, we're not perfect enough to use these systems, and these systems are designed, like, technology is inherently, that's the reason we have machine learning, we have AI, is because technology is inherently designed, like in Moore's law, going back to that, it's designed to keep itself getting better.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's just, and it's the science of DNA, because that's at the heart of what science is.
Right.
So it's just like, no matter what, it's just going to be exponential. It's just going to exponentially grow.
Yeah.
And I think, you talked about, like, before you had these pockets of, like, and I also think the internet used to be a place where the cost, it was like, going into that fan club group. Like, you have to read the book to be in the book club. It's the same thing with the internet. Like, you had to know how to, if you were back on MySpace, most people
had to
were
know how to code.
basic coders.
Yeah.
We had basic,
that's crazy to think
coders
of.
back in the day, like, on MySpace. You know
Crazy.
what I'm saying? Like, and that's, you know what I'm saying? That's the thing. And that's the great thing about humanity, that we're willing to do anything for that cost of entry.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's crazy, and it's literally crazy, because to go back to the fact that MySpace was a platform where you had to code your own page.
And keep in mind, MySpace was owned by a guy who never thought to sell your data, never
Right.
thought to,
he wasn't trying to
integrate
capitalize
stories, like,
people.
Integrate someone else's social media.
If
Like,
you think about MySpace,
it wasn't a monopoly.
It was not. It was a true internet community.
Because you knew why you were signing up.
Yeah, and you knew exactly. And yes, you could make money as a musician, you can make money as an artist, but that was not the point. And it was just certain people that realized, oh, I can use this platform for that means.
And it responded to the people. It didn't. That's the thing. Facebook, because of the people, and this is also a concept of business too. But, like, how people talk about how, like, Facebook, although it has all these problems, will be the last social media site. And the reason that it will be is because it's managed to understand, it's led a charge in the way of social media is good for business.
Yeah,
100%. And not only that, social media is kind to business.
Yeah.
Which is a whole, that's a paradigm shift that, a lot of other tech people, and like Jack Dorsey, is like, that's why Twitter has maintained some of its integrity, because that is a shift.
Yeah.
It is a shift when you have, because, and I keep going back to Peter Thiel, but, he talked about the social platform that used to exist called SocialNet in 1997. That was based around, you were this pet. Like, you were this pet that you created this profile for. And then a few years later, you have Facebook, and it's the same idea, but just with actual people's faces.
Yeah.
So that's what's like.
It's not an avatar anymore. You're literally playing with an expression of yourself.
Right. And
that has real consequences.
And that has real consequences. And that's the thing. And that's the thing with even VR. Like, all these things are connected, because it's for the first time we don't, like, the cost for me, Holland, the girl, is it's really between her, but it's between her and I.
Mm-hmm.
It's not between myself and the 800 coders in the shadows, like software developers in the shadows, who are writing this while we're using it.
Right.
No one's writing my script. Like, it's the same thing like this. I was watching this documentary about this, like, people don't know how much, like, this lady tried to get her information from Tinder, and they wouldn't give it to her. And so she, like, had to do all this stuff, like, legal, crazy, and she had 360 pages on her.
That's crazy. That's crazy. Our friend Janelle, she was just talking about that, how she just requested all her data from Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and that was a mind-blowing concept to me, because it is your data. That is you have ownership.
You're for sale.
You have ownership from an intellectual property standpoint, But from a commodity digital standpoint, that is technically their commodity.
Well, because it's and especially when you look at these apps, because the way that they're commodified now, it's like these aren't nonprofits.
Right. They have a
They have an
goal.
incentive, and that's why going back to Westworld, shout out Westworld. But that's really the future is the commodity. Like, yeah, like we want to live in this new world, but the back end of that is the more scarier part. Is like who's logging, who I'm choosing, who I go. Like the fact that like if someone was staring at you the whole how it was when you were in the club and someone's staring at you, watching which girls you're going up to. You know how embarrassing it is like someone sees how much you struck out.
Yeah.
That's when someone's watching how many times I'm striking out.
I know that's crazy
For
to
free,
think of.
man.
That's pretty crazy to think
and
of.
they didn't sign, and I don't even know they signed up.
Yeah,
You know
that's
what I'm
crazy.
saying? They're just in the shadows in a black hoodie, Mr. Robot style.
That's nuts. That's nuts.
Knowing more about me than my dad. You know what I'm saying? Like,
yeah, that's crazy. That's crazy. And that kind of like actually a really good segue into this next kind of segment is like how do we manage these digital relationships? Because the reality is it's not going anywhere. We're not letting go of social media. Like the reality is it's too great of a connective platform, and there are too many benefits from this space that truly outweigh the
Right.
harms.
Right.
But at the same time, they have diminished in a sense our means of maintaining and building relationships. So what is the way forward,
Well, the thing about it is, and I like to look at things in a period of cycles. I think, because I'm a political science major, once you learn that there's only three major types of system of government that have ever really existed in the world at scale, you really learn, that it goes through these cycles. And so I think, it's the same, way that people thought that having a television in your home was going to diminish, listening to the radio or, going to a concert. Obviously didn't do that. I think it's the same thing. I think what we have to be conscious of, maybe that's different in those times, that I don't think we're actively doing now because there's not a lot of incentive and frankly, because of the force and strength of the thing at hand, which is social media, we haven't created, going back to what I was saying before, we haven't created anything else that took the place of what it took away.
Mm-hmm.
Like when a building gets knocked down, it's usually because, especially in a crowded city in New York City, if a building is getting knocked down, it's not getting knocked down because people want it to get knocked down.
Right.
It's getting knocked down because it has to make space for something new.
Yeah.
And that's the thing, like, we can't just keep knocking down buildings.
Right.
And then asking where everything is.
Right. Yeah. We got
to build
we
get
something.
The shit. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
We haven't created
the foundation
or the map. You know what I'm saying? To get to these
the
things.
Blueprint before even building the foundation.
Right. And I think that's really where I think the management conversation has to start is what is the just who, what, when, where, why, but what is the thing that we even, just that simple question, what do we have that gives people an incentive to create meaningful relationships? We talk about I wish Andrew Yang was the presidential candidate, but one of the things he talks about in his book is and this is a program that started in China and a lot of places, but it can't be distorted. But I think one of the programs he talked about was paying people through true social welfare. So like imagine an app in the same way like these communities have these neighborhood watch apps. Imagine a place where you can if your neighbor knows how to clean gutters or can fix your pipe if you're a stay-at-home mom or an older woman or a senior citizen, and that person gets points and gets rewarded financially for doing those acts. That's the thing.
Yeah.
People don't want to hear that.
Right.
People don't want to hear that's what I'm saying. People don't want to hear that, but they still want to hear this narrative that people are just naturally good to each other still.
Right. Yeah, that's like something that's super interesting to me because like
I'm trying to find it. Like,
yeah, that's
where's
crazy.
that narrative at?
That's actually that's
Because
crazy.
if that were true,
Yeah.
then why are we yell? Then we would have nothing to yell about.
Yeah, and I mean to be honest, like that whole like thing, that's why I kind of even wanted to begin Urban Conscious is because there's like not enough to me, I don't feel there's not enough entities that are really trying to shed light on those like very awkward, weird spaces that are it's basically a gap of
They're not weird,
modernity.
and it's funny. They're not weird. They're just where we intersect.
Exactly. It's just awkwardness because of the nature of humanity, the nature of reality, the nature of the fact that we're living. America is a melting pot. You have people that are coming from other countries, from other boroughs, other neighborhoods, where everybody's got a different perspective, and everybody's perspective is in some way valid.
Right.
But where is it that our perspective becomes true opinion that's no longer objective and is pretty much just like a protective mechanism? And where is it like we're actually trying to contribute something valuable to the bigger picture? Like that, I think is the weird place we're at right now.
And that's the weird dichotomy of social media. We talked about hyper awareness, but it has an increased self awareness, which is intrinsic to that because, I don't believe. I'm not saying I don't believe, but I understand fundamentally that. I'll just say this: it's work to truly, and I'm only speaking from my experience, of 24 years, but it's work to really reach across the aisle.
Yeah.
And that's the first thing that has to be said. We can't say it from a place like just be woke. You have to be woke. If you're not woke, you're canceled. It's work to get there.
Yeah.
It's like telling a child, "Oh, you can't do 2 + 2 + 4. You're out of school." What, dude?
It is exactly that.
How am I out of school?
It's exactly that, and
I can't learn.
That's like legit. That's where we're at. Like we haven't given people the chance to experience this shadow side of themselves in public.
And we have bad teachers.
And
we when you have bad teachers.
Exactly. We don't have people that are showing us how do we deal with this.
Bad teachers kick you out of the classroom, and that's the culture.
But that is the culture that we've created. How many? I mean, we've all been to public schools. Like that is what it is. Like how many teachers really want to interact with a child that's not their own child, and actually teach them, hey, you don't got to act like that. You don't have to act out like that. Or what exactly are you going through that's making you act out like that?
But that's the real question we're talking about right now.
Yeah.
Is how do you reinvigorate? Because that's the same thing. Like I was just saying, like it's work to reach across the aisle. It's work, like it's the same thing. Like how men feel. It's just like it's really hard for me to ask what that man has going on in his life, and we, that's the reason a lot of our masculinity gets toxic because. Like it comes from this place of like, well, I got my own thing going on. You know what I'm saying? And that's it. Like.
And
I'm only because of the society we live in. My only job is to that.
Yeah. Yeah, and that is I think
because society doesn't reward it.
Yeah, because we don't live in a communal society anymore. It's not community oriented because of capitalism, because of modernity, because of the fact that we can isolate ourselves in these social spaces. But at the same time, like, can we really though? Like, if you're really on social media and people are continuously growing and we're continuously meeting people that have different perspectives, like, can we really isolate ourselves?
But the thing is,
continuously.
No, I mean, no, not at all to that question. But the thing is, like, are we really? I beg the question now, even to what you just said is like, are we really meeting these people?
Right.
Because that's the thing. It's like,
what's the depth of that interaction? Of liking a post
and
or
is it more detrimental to me? Because there's this thing of where they talk about like especially with black people, like I forget who said it, but it's a quote like oppressed people don't have the time to teach you about how they're being oppressed because they're being oppressed. time, the time to do that is a luxury. It's like, it's like the quote of like, rich people who don't, rich people who don't read are assholes. Poor people who don't read are just, are just lost. Um, and it's the same thing. Like it's just like, yes, you have this, you have access to this information, but you don't have any way of
Digesting,
digesting
metabolizing,
it,
and expressing it.
of navigating it, or even framing it. To be
Yeah.
perfectly honest, because the way friends exist on the internet, we don't. It's not the same.
As
There's
a
no
real life interaction,
and there's-
somebody you've met through grade school,
and there's nothing
or
your
through,
parent. There's nothing that the people put in place, the structures put in place, can teach you about that.
right. Yeah.
And so you really have, and so there's always going to be, we have to understand that, like I said, that we're not perfect enough to use these systems. So there's always, we have to understand that it's from a place of, we're never going to be in full mastery of it. And I think once we, it's like an addiction, first step is acknowledgement,
Mm-hmm.
and I think that's really the what it is.
Yeah. We have to recognize
'Cause
how
it
these
hasn't been-
systems have shorted us, how they've done a disservice to us. And it goes back to what you said earlier, the information versus knowledge thing.
Right.
Like, we are living in the information age, but like, what's the value of that when you've got a government that is telling people that the things that experts are saying as far as dealing with the COVID pandemic, don't follow it just because I don't want to follow it. Not because there's another alternative that is more sensible, but just because I don't want to do that because that you're trying to take away my rights.
But also,
That's crazy,
it's also a false reality, though, because it's based on the fact that the idea of wearing masks is so magnified in the community that I exist in, which is basically just social media for most people. And that informs, your brain can't differentiate. Like, it's the same way when you're in a group of people, like at a concert, it's like, the Michael Scott, The Office, like, we were at a Doobie Brothers concert, I saw the whole row smoking. I thought it was a cigarette, what I'm saying, and that's the thing. It's like, and you can find yourself in a place you didn't expect to be in, you know what I'm saying? Like, and that episode is a perfect example. He blames the, who found, where did this weed come from? He blames on everyone else. And I think that's what we do. When we find ourselves at a loss, especially because we see everyone else saying it, we naturally get defensive.
Yeah.
Because it's like, well, how can I be, because we take it so personally, so, well, how can I be personally attacked when everyone else is saying this? Or,
but it's still important.
It creates
to be,
this.
Yeah, it does. It creates an
Because-
animosity and it's just a tension. It's a tension of like, well, this is happening. Why can't I enjoy that? But it's because these are toxic things.
But it doesn't
that
help.
we don't see as toxic.
But the thing is, it's only, social media is still, it's funny thinking about this. Social media is still two-dimensional.
Oh, 100%. 100%. Oh my God, I got a guy out in Arizona, my guy Jordan. If you hear this, I know you've been waiting for this podcast to come out. That's gonna be something for a whole nother episode. But
That's
right
what I was
there,
saying. We gotta write that down.
social media is two-dimensional.
And we're three-dimensional creatures.
And you could almost argue four-dimensional just because we can go back in terms of memory and experience
exactly.
things.
The fact that we understand the concept of time,
Yeah,
or that we can measure it, so it gives us we're not completely in 4D, but it gives us a view. And that's what we have to understand. We exist in real space in real time.
mm-hmm.
Social media, although it gives us that illusion, like Twitter, for example, is the illusion of real time. But in a real world, we know that they can probably edit those tweets that we don't. And by the fact of what the algorithm is, and especially on Instagram, it shows you what things you want to see or things you want to see.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm saying, that's what I'm saying. Like, we exist in this, but that's not how 3D space works.
Right.
Like, the only way the bullet stops is if the wall's there. Because the physical space allows it to keep going forever.
Yeah.
And it's going to interact with whatever it interacts with. Like, it's not getting, like, the bullet, like, when you shoot a bullet, it's not in a pipe going to one place. It's gonna go wherever it lands, and that's the same thing. Like we do that in social media in a 2D space.
Yeah, without intention most of the time.
Well, because we don't know really, because it's especially like the 3D space. I can see where the mother effing bullet is gonna hit. I can see the hole. I can't see the hole.
Yeah,
in
because social media is a shot in the dark. It's like Twitter
All
Twitter
shot in the
especially
dark.
is a shot in the dark. Like I feel like that platform. I love Twitter. I've
love
been
Twitter,
I
man.
was an
Shout out
early
Jack Dorsey,
adopter
man.
of Twitter. Like it's a great platform, but it's a shot in the dark, and I don't think that people recognize that using a public space as a personal diary, which a lot of people tend to do just because it's part of our expressive nature as people.
Exactly.
I don't think that people recognize the consequences of that, and how that in some ways isolates you, but at the same time it does expose you to a community of people who may be able to offer you support or offer you clarity.
Right.
You know?
But when you've but it's like the kid in the candy store.
Yeah.
You can get if you don't know how to if you don't even know candy gives you cavities,
Right.
you can end up
You're gonna have the
being
time of your
sick
life.
in the middle of the candy store.
Exactly, until you get sick. It's
or
all
unless
fun
someone
and games.
shows you like, oh, this candy is gonna hurt your teeth. The thing, there's nothing like we have that in nature. We
Yeah.
have that physically, and we know. Okay, that plant is probably gonna give me a rash, so I'm not gonna go over there because if physically there's a physical and that physical interaction has a social value in the physical
Mhm.
space. Like if I'm walking around with a rash, I'm now the guy walking around with the rash. It's not the same. Like I fear that Tory Lanez in 6 months might not be the guy who shot Megan Thee Stallion. I fear that might not be relevant anymore.
Yeah,
That's the thing.
There's
There's
no
no rash.
Yeah.
There's no rash
Yeah.
for touching that tree.
Yeah.
You know, and I'm sorry I'm getting so passionate about this. I'm like, this is a new concept.
Because
for
it's
me.
a baffling situation.
because we have to- it's that simple.
situation is very baffling. Like amidst everything that's going on right now in the world, amidst everything that is trending, the fact that this woman can get shot, and everybody is trying to find a way to justify it.
And she has to explain herself.
Yeah, and that's crazy. You know, that's crazy. A victim is now being made to. They're being gaslit, and they're being made to feel that-
authenticate their real experience.
Yeah, that's crazy. Their real traumatic experience,
Insane.
where they are pulled over and shown on national television walking with.
They were the
with
victim
bloody
of
feet.
this
She was
situation.
shot.
Not even
She was
the.
shot.
This wasn't even just a situation. This is a victim of a situation outside of their control,
Yeah, and
which
it's
is something every human should be able to relate to.
yes, but that goes to show you just how much social media has
Distorted.
desensitized us and distorted our reality. We don't really understand consequences the same. We don't understand like what these things are doing to us.
And it's the same thing. It's like, I was in my meditation today. It's actually funny, it was the saying like, basically I'm paraphrasing, but self-love is when you create the space in your mind to love yourself. This is how it said. Yeah, when you create the space in your mind to love yourself, it opens up the space for you to love other people.
Yes.
so-
yes. Always got to start with yourself.
And that's the thing, like, and that's the same thing with social media. We don't know. That's the thing. We don't know how. We don't have a criteria for how we want to be
Right.
ourselves.
Yeah.
Like I was even thinking about that today. I was like, and I even almost giving myself a pat on the back. I was like, man, I'm playing the game. Like I edited one of your photos that I'm gonna post in a couple of days. I'm like, why is that the vision of like being a productive, contributing member, aware member of
this cultural
why
platform.
is it that like people who, and I don't know if anyone else has this equation in their head, but it's like people who post more you think have it more together in life.
Yeah, because it's like a time thing. It's like, oh, this person has the time to post this, so they must be
But
doing
it's funny that only exists in this imaginary space because there's billions of people like, and this is one of the big things of social media, of the internet. Over half the people in this world, let's keep it in mind, people, don't have access to the internet.
Right.
So what you're seeing, not only are you seeing a small fraction of a fraction of a fraction, you're seeing even a small fraction because we only can swim in our own
Yeah,
swimming pool. You know, so it's just
yeah.
like
It's we have to learn to broaden that horizon, to broaden the perspective,
clearly,
and like you said, like we have to be able to take the times to detach from these platforms and go within. Like, I'm a big proponent of meditation. I think
hmm
that it's one of the most helpful things in navigating this contemporary reality where we have so many digital influences and technological influences. But I think it also allows us to reflect on things and to come to these like very personal realizations that allow us to interact in these spaces that are very real as much as they are digital. They are very real, and to do so with a little bit more, with more intention, with more accountability,
right,
with more mind. You know,
right,
I think that's what it comes down to.
and I think meditation is so important because and I think shout out to Headspace. I think Headspace is great, but because I think the real key of meditation is not just like getting you away from your phone or shutting all the thoughts out. I think what it really does is you know like in our whole conversation we were we touched on you could I guess we can sum it up in a way that we're touching on the metaphysical
Mm,
of social media,
yeah,
and that's very real. And the reason meditation, why I'm saying it's so important is because it's a practice.
yeah,
And we talk a lot about, and people talk a lot about, you know, um, mindsets and mentalities for people, or shun people who use social media too much, or I set limits on my phone or things like that, because you do need a physical practice
yeah.
to combat.
To center you, to
Because although
ground you.
social media doesn't seem physical, it seems static because it's in our phone. It's very the way it maneuvers. It because it's replicating who we are essentially. It's essentially that's essentially what the digital space is. It's just social media. It's trying to replicate the physical world.
Yeah, yeah,
So essentially, all the dynamics, the things that we've created, the likes, the things like that, those are things that not necessarily that we invented, but things that we've essentially transferred
yeah.
into this digital space. But we didn't transfer, you know, like someone teaches you how, I mean, hopefully someone does, but there's a because humanity exists for so long. There's a lot of talk about how a handshake should feel.
Mm,
There's no talk about how you know, how you talk to a stranger on social media, or how you
right.
even I was benefited in having a class, and some people don't take it into college, I guess, but I had it in high school of media literacy.
Mm.
But even in that media literacy,
That should be like a high school level class at
it
this point.
is it should be. But but if you look at most media literacies, it doesn't talk. It only talks from a pure technical standpoint.
Right.
It
It's
doesn't
not from
really
a
talk from a
social.
point of what you use it most for.
Yeah.
And it's I see it becoming increasingly important because I don't know how many people, obviously a lot of people aren't working, but if you are working from home, like we use Microsoft Teams a lot, um, and there, I was just thinking like, the way people, because it's we're all like we all have different, there's different groups, but you know, um, some people don't say hello all the time. Like when
Mm.
they come into the group, they just hit the thumbs up, and that's how you know they're in the group.
Right.
So it's like there's certain things like that, and like, but I even feel weird like sometimes when I don't say hello, like actually
Right.
type it in. I'm like, why am I so fucking lazy? I can't type 5 letters. You know,
Yeah. It's crazy, man.
it's just
I think this is a good place to end off for this segment of
yeah,
State of the Culture. But I guess some things that we could leave you guys with is really to be intentional with your social media usage.
right.
Find ways to keep yourself accountable. And whatever that means to you, like be observant, be aware of how you're interacting with these
Create a
spaces.
criteria.
Yeah, create a
What
criteria.
is that criteria for you?
Yeah,
Like how much time is too much time? What's a good post? What's not a good post? What's a good
yeah,
comment? was not a good comment. You know, we're not here to tell you. You know, I just think it's important that
that we're aware of these things.
yeah,
and
and that you can control them. You know.
yeah, and one thing I read recently, my mom has this stack of mindfulness cards that she keeps in the kitchen, and I love it because it's just these little quick blurbs, and the blurb that really kind of hit me that I read yesterday was "see the screen." And what that meant is that we use these digital spaces, we interact with these technological devices so frequently, that we often forget to see the screen. We often forget to recognize that we are operating in a platform, and that in that we're zooming, we're tuning out a whole array of experience that is happening outside of that screen, that prior to the advent of these technological means we would have had to just live through. It would have just been a mundane experience that we're observing nature, or we're observing the person in the same room as us that we've never met before, and we have to have that interaction. Now, because of technology, we can be immersed in this little world. So see the screen, allow yourself to recognize that you can pull yourself away from that, and that you can go in, but know that there are consequences to both of those things.
Right, and just to add on to that, you know, it ended in the Shakespeare, you know, all the world's a stage, man.
Yeah, man. Yeah. And this is State of the Culture. Thank you guys for listening. Excited to bring you guys more episodes.
Peace, peace.